Hi everybody, my name is Lucas with Custom Firearm Solutions. Today we're going to be showing you how to repair and refinish an old worn out stock. Customer brought in a stock off of a Mauser 98. It's an old antique that's a family heirloom. He doesn't want it to look brand spanking new. We want to go through and refinish it and make it structurally sound again. This stock is heavily faded in all the wear spots where you normally hold a gun. The clear coat is almost completely all the way off. The end cap from when this stock was built is loose, and there's quite a gap in between there. We're going to re-glue and reseal that end cap. The buttstock on this is an older buttstock. I want to leave that old look. I don't want to put a new one on there. We're just going to clean it up a little bit and then reseal it as well. The inside of the wood is looking pretty good. There's a very small hairline crack at the back here. We're going to look at that, make sure it's not too bad. We don't want that to spread it anymore. The interior under the action is all pretty good and hydrated. It's not too dried out. But while we're in there, we'll go ahead and re-oil that. And we'll get this thing looking refinished and shiny again. Again, I don't want it to look brand spanking new. We want to leave that character that it has. But let's dive into this and get started. So just to show you a little more what we're up against, it's a little harder to see on camera, but you can see here that all the clear coat is worn away right where your hand would be gripping that over the years. All this clear coat we're going to sand down, touch up the stain, and we'll reseal it all to look brand new again. Here's a little close-up of the end cap. You'll see that the end of it is loose. It's completely separated. There's no more glue left in there. We're going to have to remove that and clean that up. On the inside, you won't be able to see it on camera, but there's a little 1-inch crack starting to form right there. It does not appear to go all the way through. It is not on the inside of the action. I'm going to take a little closer look to it, but I think we're just going to reseal that and call that good with no big repair. You'll see on the buttstock that all this finish here, all this clear coat is worn off. We're going to sand that down, touch up the stain, and reseal that again with some new clear coat. I do like the look of the old buttstock. We're going to leave that on just how it is. We're going to clean up that white ridge in there, and we're going to make that look nice and shiny again. So now first things first, I want to take off this end piece that's loose. I don't want to actually break that dowel that's in there. So very, very carefully, we're going to slide this thing out of there. All right, and on the inside you can see remnants of glue on both sides. We're going to clean all that off and re-glue that here in just a little bit. Next, on the buttstock, I want to remove this sling post. It's just a standard screw in, so I use a little punch. Put your punch through the hole and simply unscrew it. Now this buttstock is very old and dry. Chances are when I remove these screws here that are embedded in this rubber, it's going to dry and crack really, really bad. I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to leave this buttstock on for the restoration here. For the most part, it does line up pretty well with the wood. We should be able to sand right around it without having to take that off. From there, this does have a front sling post. There's a metal insert. This metal insert is recessed a little bit into the wood, so we're going to leave that in there. We're not going to punch that out. We'll be able to sand and refinish right around that. So to start refinishing, I'm going to take some 220 grit sandpaper by hand, and I'm going to go over all of this wood until it all looks uniform and there's no more shiny spots on there. From there, I'll be able to get a good look to see if there's any big divots or gouges that I may have missed that we might want to bring back to the surface and smooth out. But I'll quick do some sanding and we'll be right back. After very quick light sanding there with 220 grit, before I wipe all the dust off here, everywhere that has a little pit or scratch or ding is going to show really easy with that sawdust still in there. For example, down here, you're not going to be able to see it on camera, but there's a pretty big chunk of wood that's missing out of the stock here that I didn't see originally. blended in very well. But it looks like when this stock was custom built for this action, maybe a little bit too much was taken away with a chisel there, and it bent out some of the wood fibers there. Otherwise, on the back of this buttstock here, there's quite a few indentations here and there throughout the whole end of the stock. I don't want this to look brand spanking new. We want to leave that character. There's nothing too deep or too concerning. I think I'm going to leave everything that's there just to keep that character of a used stock there. Again, this is a family heirloom. I don't want it to look brand spanking new. We want to leave that nice old character to the wood here. On the end of the stock here, I'm going to clean off all this old glue so we can get a real nice tight finish here. When you're doing that, I would not recommend doing that by hand, because if you accidentally curve over your ends, you're going to have a gap in your wood there. I recommend taking that to a belt sander and keeping it perfectly square. Just lightly take off that glue, but keeping your sanding very, very square so you don't have any gap there when we re-glue this up. I'm going to go take that to my belt sander here real quick, and I'll be right back. And now that fits up nice and tight. This dowel is actually in pretty good shape yet, so I'm going to reuse this dowel. I'm just going to take some sandpaper to it and clean off some of the glue on there. And then we're all ready for glue up. So before I do any more sanding, I want to get this end cap glued up to the stock again. So we verified it has a nice tight fit after we cleaned off the old glue. The old dowel is still in really good shape. Cleaned off the old glue there. I cleaned out these little holes that the dowel went in so everything will press back together. And we're ready for glue up. We're going to wipe off any sawdust that may or may not be on there. You want to buy a good quality stainable wood glue. Something that's also weather, water resistant. If you use a cheap wood glue, you're just going to have this same thing happen again. And we don't want to have that, of course. I always use a cheap brush to apply my wood glue so it's nice and even. Make sure that none of the bristles stick in that glue. With cheap brushes, the bristles like to fall out. And we don't need much glue. So first thing I'm going to do is coat this dowel half. And when I insert it, I'm going to twist it as I go in so everything is coated nice and evenly. And to make sure it's seated, I'm going to give it a little tap. And then we'll coat this whole half of the seam, as well as the remaining dowel. And then I'm going to coat this half, just to make sure I have complete coverage. Slide everything back together, give it a little twist. And we'll wipe off any of the excess glue. Now to keep this clamp tight, I don't want to put a traditional clamp on end to end. I don't want to ruin this nice round edge on here. So I use these exercise bands that you can get pretty much anywhere now. And I'm literally just going to rubber band it together. I like to use the flat bands in some applications like this. That way it'll curve right around that end. Sometimes you can use the round ones if you're clamping on a different angle. But get her good and tight. And then we'll take a peek inside and just make sure everything's lined up nice and straight yet. And everything's still lined up nice. I'm going to go ahead and let that sit overnight. And we'll come back tomorrow and do some more sanding. And we're back. Our glue up has dried overnight. We're going to take a look and see how that did. And everything glued up real nice on that. Just a little bit of excess glue to sand off. But otherwise, we're going to prep this stock for refinish. So first thing I'm going to do is with 220 grit sandpaper, just touch up our glue spots there. And then I'm going to go over the entire thing one last time with some 320 grit sandpaper. And I just want the whole surface to be smooth and evenly sanded before we go ahead and refinish this. So I'll quick sand this up and then we'll get it over to refinish. All right, and after we've had our last coat of sanding done on there, just one quick final inspection. Want to make sure that everything's nice and smooth and evenly sanded. We want to make sure there's no more shiny spots. Everything has a matte finish to it from the sanding. And from there, we're good to go ahead and touch up the staining. I do have a stain that pretty closely matches this stain. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect because once we go over, it's going to blend real nicely. And you don't need very much, even if you want to buy little jars at the hardware store is all you need. But I'll grab that stain here in a fresh cloth and we'll get applying that stain. And as with staining anything, make sure you do mix your stain very well. You want to stir that, not shake it, or else you have a bunch of air bubbles in your stain. You can take a foam brush, you can take a stain brush, or I prefer to literally just take a good clean rag. This one is a clean microfiber cloth, just so there's no lint on it. And you don't need very much, but we're just going to rub down the wood, try to go with the grain, follows the best, and just coat everything nice and evenly there. And then once you coat all of the wood, I go ahead and flip my rag over to a clean spot, a nice dry spot. I'm going to go over the whole thing one more time with the dry spot, with the dry rag. Just make sure there's no extra excess of stain on your wood. All right, and after that, you can take one good last inspection on it, make sure you didn't miss any spots. Everything should look nice and evenly coated. And you shouldn't see any fade spots or anything like that where you may have missed a sanding. Typically, depending what clear coat you're using, you can just let it sit and dry for a couple hours and you'd be fine. The clear coat that I use is very picky. I'm going to let this sit overnight just to make sure it's good and fully dry before I add my 2-part clear coat over top of this. So from there, we're just going to carefully set it in a way that's not going to rub on the stain as it sits to dry. And once again, I'm going to let that sit overnight and we'll come back tomorrow and we'll do the clear coat on the wood. All right, and it has been another night of dry time on this guy here. The stain is good and dry and the stock looks really, really good. So I need to do one last prep before I go ahead and do my clear coat on this. Before we do that, I want to make sure there's no imperfections or impurities in the stain. I want to make sure there's no dust or nothing like that. So we have what's called tack cloth. It's essentially, looks like cheesecloth, but it's kind of sticky almost without being glue sticky. Basically, I'm going to wipe down this whole stock with this tack cloth, and that'll pick up any little bitty particles of dust, anything that I can't see. So I'll get, as well as it gives me one more time, I can really inspect this thing as I go. So I'm just going to wipe down this stock here, cover everything that I can and cannot see. And then after this, I want to be very careful as to where I put this stock, as I don't want there to be any kind of dust or anything in the air. I don't want anything getting on this wood before I clear coat it. And you just want to take your time and make sure you got everything very well. All right, once that's all done, for the most part, tack cloth is a one-time use cloth. I would not try to save it. You could try putting it in a Ziploc bag or something. You might be able to save it for a little bit, but you're going to lose the tackiness of it over time after the package has been opened. But this stock is now ready to go for clear coat. I do use a 2-part clear coat for extra durability. I'll go ahead and get this thing sprayed up. Again, I'll let it sit overnight. And after that, we should be all done for a final inspection. And we'll go from there. So I'll get this over to the booth and I'll spray this up. And I'll come back tomorrow when it's all dry. All right, and here's the finished product. Got it out of the paint booth, let it sit overnight. Clear coat's all done. I put a very heavy clear coat on there to give it a lot of extra wear protection for the next several years. Turned out fantastic. And a quick inspection on it, everything's nice and smooth and glossy again. Turned out really, really well. You can still see all the character of the wood underneath from the years of use. And I'm just very pleased with how it came out. Now, one thing to mention, if you come out and you had a little speck of dust or there's something not quite right in your finish here in your clear coat, you can always take this down with a real fine sandpaper and rebuff it. Or you can also use, they make a wood polish, if you will. A little bit of grit to it and it'll bring that shine back if you needed to polish out any little specks or imperfections. But this one turned out really, really well, so we're good to go ahead and reinstall this on the Action. So complete this job here, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for more.